Now, so far, we've only used variables that store one thing, such as a float that stores a number or a string that stores some text. However, often in programming, we want to work with an entire list of items. So in this video, we'll learn how to use lists and arrays to store many things in a single variable. But before we get into it, this video is sponsored by Core. Core is the new game creation platform that lets you build, publish, and play games. If you're just starting out making games, Core is a great solution as no coding skills are required. You can get started making games right away using their thousands of free, high-quality music, sound, and art assets. Core also lets you create your own game logic in Lua and build your own levels and art with their easy-to-use tools. From August 6th to September 6th, in collaboration with Dungeons & Dragons, Core is also hosting a fantasy-themed dungeon building contest with over $20,000 in prizes. Content from this contest will also be showcased at PAX alongside a panel of celebrities who will be reliving some of their favorite moments from D&D campaigns, all recreated in Core. Again, Core is completely free, so definitely go check it out at coregames.com or simply click the link in the description. Now, when we want to create a list of items, such as my favorite characters in Game of Thrones, for example, the easiest way to do this in C# is with an array. Arrays allow us to store multiple values in a single variable. And the syntax for creating an array is actually fairly simple. First, we put the type of the variables that we want our array to store. In this case here, that's a string. Then we open and close two square brackets, followed by the name of the variable. Now, if we already know what to put inside of our array, we can simply do that here. To do this, we write an equal sign, then open and close curly brackets, and put a semicolon. Inside the curly brackets, we put all the values we want, separated by commas. And because we're using strings here, we need to remember the quotation marks. I'll put Varys, Cersei, Tyrion, and Bronn. Definitely not Bran, but Bronn. Sorry, Bran fans, let the discussion commence. And that's it. We've now created an array. A highly subjective array, but an array nonetheless. Now, when we're creating an array, think of it like we're creating a table of items, where each item has a number associated with it. We refer to this number as the index. The first item always has an index of 0, the second item an index of 1, then 2, and so on. And we use the index to access an element inside the array. If, for example, we want to print out my second favorite Game of Thrones character, we would write console.write and then input the name of the array followed by two square brackets. And this is where we specify an index. So because the index starts from 0, to display my second favorite Game of Thrones character, we input an index of 1. And this indeed prints out Cersei. And this is cool and all, but where arrays really start to shine is when we combine them with loops. So let's jump into VS Code and try that out. So let's start out by creating an array. I'm going to create a string array, and I'm going to have it store some of my favorite movies. And since I know these beforehand, we can go ahead and use the equal sign, then some curly brackets, followed by a semicolon. And in here, we can put some of the movies. So I'm going to start with Lord of the Rings. I'm going to throw in Fight Club, Interstellar, and let's just put in Gladiator. Definitely a lot of good movies here. And we can actually loop through these movies using a for loop. So let's go ahead and create a for loop. I'm going to write for. I'm going to go down to here where it says for loop and hit tab in order to auto-complete it. I'm going to call my variable I here for index. And then the length here, I'm going to continue as long as I is less than, let's just put in 10. And that's it, we've now created a for loop. Now inside of this, we can go ahead and use console.writeLine in order to write something out each time we go through the loop. And right now, I'm just going to print out I. So we've created a for loop here that makes a variable called I and sets it equal to 0. It's then going to write out that number and keep doing this as long as I is less than 10. So if we just run our program now, we can see that this prints out the numbers 0 through 9. And instead of just printing these numbers, we can use them as indexes to access the different elements in our array. So instead of just printing out console.writeLine I, we can actually print out movies and then open and close some square brackets. And inside of these, we can then put that I. So the first time we go through the loop, I is going to be 0. And so we're going to take the first element of our movies array, which is Lord of the Rings. Then the second time, I is going to be 1. And so we're going to go to the second element of our array, which is Fight Club. And it's going to keep doing this as long as I is less than. And here we want to put in the length of our array. So in our case, we have 4 elements in here. So I'm just going to write 4. And indeed, if we now run this program, we can see that it no longer prints out the index, but instead actually accesses the element in the array with that index. So Lord of the Rings, Fight Club, Interstellar, and then Gladiator. Awesome. And we could just write it like this, but instead of hard coding the length of our array like this, it's better practice to go movies.length. This way, if we later decide to add or remove an element from our movies array, this number is going to update, and so a for loop will always run the appropriate number of times. Now, we could just show the movies like this, or we could add the ranking. So we can actually use our I variable to show what number the current movie is in our array. So before we print out the movie, we can create an integer, let's call it rank, and set it equal to I plus 1. Because I starts at 0, we add the plus 1 here, so that our rank will start at 1, then go to 2, then 3, and then 4. What we can then do is add the rank variable to our write line. So here we can go and print out rank plus, I'm going to add a dot and a space here, and then plus the movie at that index. So what we now get if we run this are all of the same movies, but ranked 1 through 4. Awesome, so you can see how easy it is to work with arrays as long as we remember this relationship between the index and the value that we're trying to access. But sometimes we don't know beforehand what we want in our array. If, for example, we want the user to input their favorite movies, we can't immediately assign values to the array. Instead, we need to create an empty array first and then populate the values one by one. So let me remove the code here. And instead what we'll do is create an empty array. And to do this, we use the same syntax. So string, square brackets, let's call it movies. And then after the equals sign, we write new, then the type of array, in our case that's string, followed by the square brackets, and then a semicolon. Then inside of the brackets, we get to specify the length. This is how many elements we want our array to store. In this case, let's just have the user input 4 movies, so we'll set this to 4. And there you go, we've now created an array that can hold 4 strings. We can then tell the user to input 4 movies, so we'll go console.writeLine, type in 4 movies, and then we can assign a value to each element in the array by using the index. So to assign the first movie, we go movies, then we give it the index of 0, and we set this equal to console.readLine, so whatever the user typed in. And we can do this 4 times, 1 for each index. So for the second one, we're going to put in 1. For the third one, we're going to put in 2. And for the fourth one, we'll put in 3. And this should indeed work. If we now run this program, we can see that we are prompted to type in 4 movies. I'm going to type in Pulp Fiction, Inception, Harry Potter, and Karate Kid. And now we can't type in any more. That will just close down the console. So as you can see, nothing is really happening here, but we are actually storing these values inside of our array. And we can now start to do things with them. If, for example, we wanted to display them in alphabetical order, we could use the sort method. So we'll add some extra lines here. We'll write out something to the user. So we'll go console.writeLine and say something like, here they are alphabetically. And I'm just going to add a new line at the start of that just to make the formatting better. Then we can sort the array. To do that, we go array.sort. And here we simply input the name of our array. So in our case, that is movies. And that is actually going to go ahead and just sort it alphabetically. You can do this if you have a bunch of numbers as well using the same function, which is going to sort them in ascending order. And then we can simply print out all the movies. Again, we could do this one by one, but it's much easier to use the for loop. So we'll write for int I equals 0. We'll keep going as long as I is less than movies.length. And in here, we'll just do console.writeLine and then movies, input the I for the index and close that up with a semicolon. And before we test this, I just want to clean up our code a tiny bit, because just like we're using a for loop down here in order to print out all of our movies, let's also use a for loop up here when we're gathering input. There's really no reason why we should do this one by one. So instead of writing these 4 lines here, we can simply use a for loop. Again, start the index at 0, keep going as long as I is less than movies.length. And then we can take one of these lines here, and instead of putting in 0, 1, 2, or 3, we just put in the I. That means that we can get rid of all these lines right here, which is much cleaner, especially if you're working with a huge amount of items. And if we go ahead and run this program now, we can type in for movies, hit enter, and the computer solves them alphabetically and displays them in that order. Awesome! So that's just a simple example of how we can combine arrays with for loops in order to automate things when we're working with a lot of items. Of course, one of the disadvantages of using arrays is that they have a fixed size. This means that once we've created an array and given it a length, in this case we've given it a length of 4, we cannot change it. So if we don't know beforehand how many items we want to store, we instead use a list. When working with lists, we don't need to specify a length, they are totally resizable. A good example of where this is useful is if we're creating a shopping list. Here we could use a list to keep track of all the items we need to purchase. Now, to use a list, we actually need to include another namespace. You can think of namespaces like groups of functionality that we can import in order to do different things. For example, when making a game, we often have a namespace dedicated to audio, one for graphics, one for input, and so on. So far, we've just been using the default system namespace. We can see that here at the top. This includes the console class that we've been using so much. But lists are inside another namespace. So at the top, we need to add another line, and here we'll write using followed by the namespace we want to include. Lists are inside of the system.collections.generic namespace. So just by writing that here, we've now included all of this functionality that we can now use in our program. And with that, we can start using lists. Now, a list is something that we call a generic, which makes the syntax a bit different from a normal array. To create a list, we first type list, then a less than sign, followed by the type. In our case, we want this to be string, and then a greater than sign. We then put a name here. I'm going to type shopping list. And just like when we created an empty array, we also need to create an empty list. Again, the syntax for this is a bit weird, but just type after me. So we'll create an equal sign here. We'll then type new list of type string, followed by 2 parentheses and a semicolon. And that's it. We've now created a list. And this is by far the most scary part of working with lists. From here on, it's actually really simple. If we want to add an item to our list, we simply go shopping list.add, and then we put in what we want to add. Now, I'm going to go shopping in a pretty unconventional place, the Intergalactic Heaven Express Mall. And here they sell items such as dreams. So I'm going to add that to my shopping cart. I'm also going to add another thing here. So I'll add another line. I'm going to add miracles. And let's just do a couple more. Rainbows and maybe a pony. So now that we've added all these things to our list, we can go ahead and print them out. And this works in the exact same way as a normal array. We can use a for loop. Let's hit tab again to autocomplete. And we're going to loop through as long as I is less than shopping list dot. And when working with lists, we cannot write length here. Instead, we have to write count. Don't ask me why, but that's just how it is. So just remember that when working with arrays, to get the length, you write length. And when working with lists, you write count. Simple as that. And that's pretty much the only thing that's different. We can now go console.writeLine, access the shopping list, type some square brackets, and put in I as the index. And that's it. If we now hit F5 and run this, we can see it prints out all of the items in our shopping list. So far, so good. But we could just have done this with a normal array. One of the things that makes lists really handy is that we can easily remove from them. So if we decide to scratch a couple of things from our shopping list, we can simply go shopping list.remove and then input the item we want to remove. Say I figured out that I already had some dreams left over in the fridge, I could simply remove that from the list. And we can actually also choose to remove using an index. So we can go shopping list.remove at and then input some kind of index here. So if we want to remove the second item, we can put in 1. And with these things removed, let's display the list once more. So I'm just going to go ahead and do console.writeLine. I'm just going to write a bunch of dashes here just to kind of separate the two lists. And then we can do another for loop. In fact, we can simply copy the one from up here down here. And if we now run this, I'm just going to place this over here. As we can see, it prints out the entire list with dreams, miracles, rainbows, and a pony. It then removes the dreams and then removes the second item. But because we've already removed dreams, our first item is now miracles with an index of 0, and the second item is rainbows with an index of 1. And so it went ahead and removed the rainbows, which leaves us with miracles and a pony. Still a pretty exciting list. So that's how you can get started using lists and arrays to store multiple items. Now, for this week's challenge, I want you to create a program that allows a teacher to input all the students in the class and have their names printed out alphabetically. You can decide for yourself if you want to use an array or a list. In my example, I've used an array. Let me just give you a quick demo. As you can see, the program starts by asking how many students are in the class. I'm just going to put in 4 here. And the reason why we're doing this is so that I know how large of an array I should create. Here we need to store 4 students, so I'm creating an array of that size. Then it says, please input the names of the students. I'm going to put in John Wick, Harry Potter, Dwayne Johnson, and Shrek. And as you can see, it creates this line here and then prints out the exact same list, but in alphabetical order. Awesome. So have fun with it. And always, I've posted my solution to this week's challenge on the Brackeys forum. There's of course a link for that in the description. That's pretty much it for this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. Also, don't forget to check out Core. It's completely free. Just visit coregames.com or click the link in the description. On that, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks to all the awesome Patreon supporters who donated in July, and a special thanks to Dante Sam, Lost to Violence Love Forever, Nifdilius, Scott McKee, Face Amerify, Replica Studios, Lou Lissette, Nobby Ninja, Jason Uritescu, Piano Sathunlark, Bobby Reynolds, Donatine Gascoigne, Marc-Antoine Girard, Jacob Sanford, Michael Korobov, Naoki Wasaki, Gregory Pierce, Owen Cooper, The Mighty Zeus, Alison the Fierce, Erasmus, I Love Brackeys, Aw, Sirius Wolf, Fred Mastro, Hassan Sher, Storm Daniels, and Dennis Solomon. You guys rock!